Sunday, Anzac Day, is a day when all of us who have benefited from those who fought for our freedom and delivered our national sovereignty, it's a day for all of us to stop and reflect and thank them. It might mean getting out of bed earlier than many people do normally, but this nation is a nation that is the envy of many others, and it's because people have been prepared to defend our values, defend our freedoms, to stand for stuff at times of great peril and to put their lives in danger, to lose their tomorrows so that we can have our todays. But it's also an opportunity for us to think about the fact of where Australia is in 2021. And to my mind, as too much of our national sovereignty has in fact been subcontracted out to so many of these international agreements that were in fact drafted to fix broken countries, but have been used by vested interests here and abroad to break ours, to break our country up, to make bad countries look better because this great country is somehow or other brought to its knees. Now, I think the way forward is to revitalise our sovereignty. And the Prime Minister has, in fact, started to govern this week. There's been enormous reasons for him to do it. We've heard and seen about the Five Eyes, the agreement of 5 countries like ours, and of course the Quad, 4 countries which has included India and Japan, Australia and the United States. These are important security fora, and these are important meetings that have been taking place. But the Prime Minister must continue to stare down the various enemies, both foreign and domestic, who want us now to be weakened, to change our traditions, to change our legal system, the way our society is operated, and of course by this climate change rubbish. Yep, it's back. And I don't know what it is that Joe Biden thinks he's trying to do, but he's not acting in Australia's best interests. And Scott Morrison is wise to be somewhat coy about these artificial targets that seem to be set by the world's left. And of course, instead of taxes, we've seen the government this week, taxes that Labor and the Greens want to bring in to pay down the debt that's been caused by this coronavirus pandemic. The Morrison government has wisely been talking about tax cuts, continuing tax cuts that were brought in last year. In other words, trusting people with their own money. The Prime Minister also, in the last couple of weeks, has done a good thing. He's let Peter Dutton be Peter Dutton. And Peter Dutton is a decent bloke. I've known him for over 30 years. He's the sort of guy that you'd want to have when there's a fight about principle on your side. And Peter Dutton's been around dealing with the troops, talking to the troops, changing decisions about unit citations, and rightly so, to get the defence game back on the road. And kudos to Peter Dutton, but kudos to Scott Morrison for letting Peter Dutton be Peter Dutton. Prime Minister's also taken action on the Belt and Road Initiative. And we found out since Maurice Payne released the tearing up of that agreement, and thank heavens for that, we told you 5 or 6 weeks ago it was coming, we found out that in fact part of that Belt and Road Agreement was a cover for international criminals coming from the mainland of China to exploit you, me and our families and friends, to move money to other places. But there's more that needs to be done. He needs to have another look at this Darwin port lease. Tear it up, throw it out. It's not in Australia's sovereignty interests for that Darwin port lease to continue. Likewise, he needs to look squarely in the eyes of the Queensland and Western Australian premiers about these islands. These governments in Western Australia and Queensland have to be brought to account for why it is that they have let off various parts of our sovereignty slip into the hands of entities that have been backed by the Chinese communists. This is real life. This is happening now. Of course, on top of all of that, there's water assets, there's transport infrastructure, both the control systems and, in fact, the tracks that are being made, tunnels that are being built in parts of Victoria, our pharmaceutical sector, and countless other agricultural assets, all in the hands of people who, frankly, I think want to do us harm. We need to define how free trade has become an almost wholesale takeover of important bits. And then there's another point of principle. It's the Republic of China on Taiwan. We need to proactively support a country which is just like ours. It's a democracy. Taiwan has a rule of law. It has a freedom of speech mantra that many there often joke maybe there's too much freedom of speech. And yet we're letting Beijing control our relationship, a relationship which 50 years ago saw Taiwan as a full diplomatic partner with Australia. But because China said no, they went. And I think this is something wrong. Then there's the taxpayer-funded media. It's a throwback concept, the idea that government has to own and operate its own media outlet. It's their ABC, taxpayer-funded television and radio, and some of their broadcasts, some of the people who work for them, it's all but seditious, and it needs serious reform. Keen to know what you think. Hashtag Hardgrave. You write to me on Twitter. You can also write to me directly, gary.hardgrave@skynews.com.au. Our panel discussion in a moment, but I just want to take time to draw a line under all of that very serious stuff to talk about something equally serious. There's been horrendous news over the last couple of days with regards to family violence. And I don't, for the life of me, understand how it could ever get that bad as relationships break down. But it's what is evident now tonight is that the system is not working. The police in Queensland are saying that obviously they've let down one family, and the effect on that family has just been horrendous and hard to bear. The court system is obviously not working, and we've certainly seen evidence of that out of South Australia. And many of us who are decent, law-abiding Australians are just wondering what it is that's going wrong if our courts and our police are saying there's something wrong. The child support system, I would suspect, also isn't working properly. There's nothing worse than an ex-politician, or in fact anybody who's currently in politics, sitting on national television and hand-wringing, and I don't want to do that. But too much of the messages we're hearing out of people in authority right now is punitive. It's picking sides. It's punitive against one party and offering support mechanisms to the other party in these disputes. Now, let's face it, there are two people in any relationship. And when those relationships break down, it's awful. But both parties need serious assessment, and they need serious assistance, resourcing, if you like, to help them through the pain of the breakup. How anybody can be so violent and so destructive to take the lives of innocent children and to hurt women and men hurting each other and whatever it happens to be is absolutely beyond me, and of course beyond most of us. But to my mind, the professional oversights of both parties, particularly those that have been brought to the attention of the police and the courts, is an absolute key idea of the way forward. That's just my point of view. I want to draw a line under it. I don't want to spend the night talking about it, but I think it's important that we all think about the way in which we can stand up for those who are vulnerable and present as vulnerable in our community.